Why is safety important to you?
Because I didn't have it when I was outside. I was different because my friends were girls. I dressed differently. I was already being told not to be so emotional. So if I couldn't cope, I had this amazing ability to ghost myself. One of my biggest things about ADHD is my loneliness. I definitely have made mistakes, and I think a lot of it came from the fact that I didn't understand how my brain worked. But at 13, I got a job in a hair salon, and honestly, community then, I was like, this is my people.
Because I'm autistic, I think differently. And back in 2015, I wanted people to drink differently. So I created Seedlip, the world's first distilled non-alcoholic spirits. I took Seedlip from my kitchen to 35 countries and the world's best bars, restaurants, and retailers. And we did it in 3.5 years. It was wild. They're delicious, they're intriguing, they're these distilled botanical blends you can just mix with tonic or have in a cocktail. You really don't need another sickly, horrible mocktail. Check us out on seedlipdrinks.com or Amazon and let me know what you think. Our next guest has a CV packed with impressive industry accolades. Adam Reed is a 3-time nominee for British Hairdresser of the Year, salon owner, entrepreneur, and global ambassador for GHD and L'Oreal. But this top-notch stylist has had his fair share of struggles too. In this episode, we dive deep into Adam's challenges with addiction and ADHD. I've known Adam for a while, and I love his honesty, and this one you're going to get loads from. Let's get into it. Let's see how great minds think differently. Adam, it is so great to see you in real life. You've been such an amazing early supporter of Seedlip. And so to go on that journey right through to now being in this chair, and then for you to reach out and say you're a big fan of the Hidden 20%, and then me to go, hey, let's go, let's do it, come on the episode. It's just great to see you here.
It's well, and you know what? I as you know, I'm very honest. My mind's not been normal forever, really. And what you've done is, for me, it's those light bulb moments of hearing people talk about an experience that you've had that you've never been able to talk about. And that's what you did, is probably one of the most important conversations now, because it's going to make a massive difference to everything.
I agree. How is your brain?
F***ed. Do you know what? I like to pretend it's fine, but then is it f***ed? So very early on, I'm going to say what I talk about is very much my own view of where I see things and where it comes from. I wouldn't want another brain, but it's hard. But I think that's society.
Yeah. And
I think society hasn't been kind to people who have brains like ours. And that's where I struggle.
You've been really open about your journey with mental health, and I see that you take very seriously the profile that you've built and therefore the responsibility that you have. Like, having followed you, listened to you, I really see that, and I really admire that, because not everybody recognizes the responsibility that they have.
Yes.
Why did you do that?
Because I needed that and didn't have it. And for me, community is so incredibly important, and it has been my whole life. I was born in East London, where community is massively strong. I was brought up down in Somerset. My grandfather suffered from ill mental health, and I saw it. I didn't understand it because it wasn't talked about as in any way as openly as it should be. And what I started to see when I did start to talk about it, and having been really scared to talk about it for such a long time because of what I thought could happen from a societal point of view, I remember once years ago somebody saying, don't talk too much about it. This was when I was getting my first mortgage. So this would be back in the late 90s. And somebody said, you don't want that on your doctor's report because you'll struggle to get a mortgage.
Wow.
And interestingly, those things just stick in my head. And it's a narrative that I onboarded, and all it did was compromise anything that I did in any way that I thought. And what I started to realize is the people in my life who were struggling with ill mental health, quite prolific people. So Isabella Blow, Lee McQueen, these people ended up taking their own lives. My grandfather took his own life when I was 13. And I very strangely, when I was given a topic that I didn't know much about when I was younger, I'd intensively research it till I got the information that I needed, and then I drop it like a hot potato and move on to the next thing. I still do that continuously. And I realized that actually that was the way that my brain worked. And I started to realize so many other people's did. And actually to feel like you're part of a community is key. And to feel like you fit into a community is key. And you know, the way that our brains work, fitting in isn't the easiest thing to do because of the way that you socialize or the way that you focus on whatever it is you focus on, because it won't be just one thing. The way that you do not have boundaries. And I was like, okay, I'm continuously being told that this is wrong and I need to conform and I need to sit tighter in society. And actually, I was very much like, I'm not going to be able to do this. So I need people around me, not to validate me, but to allow me to think that the way that my brain works isn't singular and isn't on its own.
Yeah, and therefore it's okay to be yourself.
And do you know what I struggle with now is I got diagnosed 2.5 years ago. I'm 51 now, so I know that's a surprise to you because I look so young and youthful. To be diagnosed with something that you struggled with your whole life, but you struggled because actually the non-acceptance of society, you're like, really? Really? Health? This is still health. But community allows this, you don't want to fit in, but you want to feel like you are not alone.
Yeah, and I guess you want to feel like you have a place.
Totally. And do you know what, interestingly, we've talked quite a lot about clothes today. I used tattoos and clothes as a bit of an armor. I would say my brain sits way more creative, which made me want to dress differently. And I love, it's not just how I look, it's about the cut of something. It's about the detailing, the color, the way that it sits on your body. And I was like, that for me was this incredible way to stand out. So I was never scared to be different. I was extremely badly bullied at school. And a lot of it was around the fact that I was gay, which I didn't know, because again, that wasn't a conversation that was had. And down in Somerset, it was horrific. And it was like, okay, my brain isn't working like other people's. Then I would dress the way I dressed. And I remember people saying, perhaps you shouldn't dress so flamboyantly and then you wouldn't get bullied and this, that, and, you know, and I'm like, clothes are clothes. Isn't that just a form of expression? So everything that I'm doing in society is considered wrong. That was all going into my brain. You look at school, and again, I was bullied quite bad in primary school. So in Somerset, we had 3 schools. You have primary, secondary, and upper school. And I had teachers recommending that my mum take me to a doctor because I was showing signs of homosexuality.
Oh.
I one night wanted to watch a ballet on TV, and the teacher the next day said to my dad, they probably wouldn't advise me to watch something like that for obvious reasons. But interestingly, even then, as somebody who struggled being educated with the system that was set up, I was already being labeled as somebody who wasn't as clever as other people. So I very much, in my mind, determine academia and intelligence totally differently. Is intelligence supported? No. So in my mind, I was different because my friends were girls. I dressed differently. I was already being told not to be so emotional. So one of the things that I really suffer from is extreme loneliness. I can feel very lonely even in a massively crowded room. So I suffer still from homesickness, and it's familiarity for me. And I'd get homesick going to school. So I'd get very upset about it. That wasn't supported. You weren't given a cuddle. Mm-hmm. You were told to not be so emotional. Pull yourself together. I was going to secondary school. You were then graded and put into classes that were set up in a academic system. So A1 to 4, B1 to 5. I was in B3. So I was literally told I was thick. If you get rid of anything else, the people in A1 were really clever, and they were given all sorts of support. And, you know, it was like, these are the ones you look up to. They were the ones that were awarded every year. They were the ones that were lauded to be the cleverest people in the school. Just in that system, you are made to feel quite stupid. So actually, really, school for me was a disaster. But at 13, I got a job in a hair salon, and honestly, community then, I was like, this is my people. And I felt this community spirit of creatives, and I sort of bought fashion magazines with my pocket money. Upper school was a disaster for me, really. And it's so interesting. All I wanted to do was get out and work. I knew
and you left school at 16, didn't you?
Yes, I did. And actually, very interestingly, I was working in a salon on Saturdays. I was painting children's faces on butlins in Minehead in the evenings or any holiday, getting creative. But I was earning quite a good wad of money. And I was then washing dishes in a hotel in the evening. So what I realized was, although at school I was considered lazy because I couldn't learn the way that people were learning. Not a single thing was ever celebrated that I was good at, but there were things that I was good at. And you think about back then, when you did your careers day, they graded it on some archaic numbering system of questions of, oh, do you like this? Do you like that? And this is what we recommend you to be. Hairdresser was right at the bottom of that list. It was, if you can't do anything else, you could at least be a hairdresser. And I was like, I don't really understand why people say that, because this is my dream job. And actually, I'm doing it at a weekend. I'm meeting people. I'm being educated already. I'm thriving. I want to be at work. There's something here that's just not fitting right. Don't really get it. Anyway, I did my exams and what have you. I've never opened my exam results because in 1989, I felt I was miseducated. And in my mind, I was like, I just want to prove that I can be something. The interesting part, I think, of all of that is the fact that I continuously hid who I really was in my formative years. At every point, I tried to hide who I was. And it's really interesting because I sort of semi-lived with my nan and granddad, and I would spend a lot of my time there because it was safe.
Why is safety important to you?
Because I didn't have it when I was outside. So I lived in fear, really did. I would get picked on. Some of it was physical, a lot of it was verbal, and it's the verbal that stuck with me. I didn't necessarily mind getting beaten up. It was when they said things and I couldn't break down what they were saying. And I didn't understand why people could be so cruel. And my nan was quite badly disabled, and I saw people being cruel and visible disability. So in this house in the countryside, I felt safe and secure. My nan and granddad moved to the town that we lived in to be closer. And that's when my grandfather took his life. And we do think it was planned. He had some strokes, but he also suffered from quite ill mental health. He did it in the house that we were living in at the time. And it was tough. It was really tough. And I remember then it was obviously committing suicide at the time was illegal. So it was reported in the local paper. I was leaving middle school to go to upper school. And I remember some kids at school said the reason that I got picked on was because I was weak like my grandfather. It's something that's never left my mind. I got beaten up quite badly one time. And from that time, I was really scared to cycle in between my mum and my nan. So I tend to stay where I was. I was scared to go on the school bus. I was scared to go to school. I remember I used to get really over emotional and start crying and not be able to stop crying, but not have a clue why this was happening. And I remember once being in this state of utter hysteria, begging my nan to send me to private school because I was like, if I go to that school, this will stop. That was so tough because I also knew that my brain, I had quite intrusive thoughts at the time. So I would nick bottles of alcohol. We sort of semi-laugh about it now. But my nan had this bottle of Polish vodka and my friend and I nicked it once. And honestly, it was the most horrific thing. But I liked the feeling of abandonment.
But it sounds like that was literally happening in your life anyway.
Yes.
Your grandfather, for example, but that feeling of sort of escape or is then just perpetuated, I guess, with alcohol, for example.
Yes, yeah. And also being in my own little worlds that I created, school holiday time or weekends, in my nan's back garden, I could absolutely be myself with no fear of anything. And actually, you live in this continual fear of people saying stuff that you don't really understand. Looking back then, the fact that they were calling me gay, and it was when the whole AIDS campaign started. So what I was seeing on TV was quite grotesque, really. Then I remember a boy came down to join our school. This was upper school. And I remember I was given the responsibility of showing him around the school. And I was showing him around, and a girl screamed across to the boy that I was with, I wouldn't hang around with him. He's an AIDS victim. For 4 years, I thought that I had AIDS because I didn't have a clue what it was, where I could find information. And I literally would, in my mind, go to bed thinking, well, I've got AIDS and I'm gay and this is going to happen and that's going to happen. And I've got nowhere to go, nowhere to turn to. I'm also being quite badly bullied. I'm scared to go outside. My brain is struggling to comprehend and cope with what is going on. But interestingly, I also had this utter desire to be creative and to do hair. And, that was massively my anchor. I had an amazing tiny group of friends who we wouldn't talk about what was going on, but I knew they were there. And again, for me, that was that element of community. That was a lot of things going on, but also a compromised brain.
Yeah. And the stat of children who are ADHD being exposed to 20,000 more negative messages in their childhood, just listening to you, you can easily get to 20,000 there.
Yes.
Right?
Do you know, interestingly as well, is I'll focus on the negatives. I'm blinded by the positives. I will focus on those negatives so they are all consuming.
So then when you look back and now you are a late diagnosed ADHD, how do you reflect your ADHD on growing up?
It's an interesting one. The amount of people that say, oh, it's a superpower. It gives me this drive and opportunity. For me, especially late diagnosis, I don't see that at all. It makes sense. And when I look back, I'm like, okay, that makes sense. Knowledge is power, and there's no doubt about it. And as I said, it helps me make sense of so many things. It makes me feel really sad, though.
Why did you get diagnosed? Why did you go for an assessment?
Test to make sense.
Okay.
For me, it was to make sense. And it was to show that I'm brave enough to do it. So I spent years thinking, don't open that can of worms. Don't do that. I've got some very good friends who had tried to help me, and they had advised me and sent me to different people. It's very important to say, I'm also that person who I'll read the tiniest thing and it will say, this will help you. I go all guns blazing for 25 minutes. I think it's the best thing since sliced bread. 26 minutes, I'm like, oh, didn't work. I'm going to move on. One of my old amazing assistants coined it a circus brain. She loved working with me and she loved the circus element of it. But I was like, if my head is in a bad place, nothing will work because I have no concept of concentrating enough to make it work.
So how do you look after your brain?
Talking. So I interestingly find sharing so important. I struggle with medication. I am on medication. I've been on medication for a long time. I really
ADHD
struggle.
medication?
No, I've tried ADHD medication, but I really didn't like it. And again, I don't know if I didn't like it because I didn't want to like it, because I was scared that I wouldn't be me. I take sertraline at a really high level for anxiety. I was diagnosed ADHD combined prior to that, diagnosed with severe paranoia. So that's a struggle because I second guess everything. Depression and severe anxiety. There are other things in there that I'm sort of like, I've got to deal with that stuff first. But from looking after my brain, I talk, I share, I'm way more honest. So I was a really good ghoster, and I ghosted myself as much as other people. So if I couldn't cope, I had this amazing ability to ghost myself. I still do it, and I know I'm doing it, and it frightens the life out of me because I would often, twice, 3 times a day, say to myself, don't put that to the back of your head, because the back of your head is so full of that it will get lost in there, but I know it's happening. So not only do I ghost situations, I ghost myself, and I'm trying to be way more open about that. I cannot regulate anything. So I cannot regulate my workload, my family life. I do not have boundaries. So you've asked me how I look after my head. I'm sort of, do you know what? At the moment, being really honest about that stuff is really looking after my head. Because again, if I can say to somebody, listen, guys, I really struggle with boundaries and I'm going to get really upset. And this isn't personal. Rarely anything that I do is personal. It is me reacting and my mind reacting to protect me and to protect those people around me. And it comes out wrong. But again, society hasn't done a very good job of setting up coping mechanisms for people whose brain works differently.
What about supplements?
Oh, I'm a supplement fan. Mushrooms. I'm mushrooms all the way. Interestingly, I started with, are we allowed to say brands here? Because yeah, Dirty.
Yep.
So I read about Dirty and I was like, I'm going to buy the mix kit. And I will try everything. It's really important to let anybody that's listening know, if I get into something, it's an all or nothing obsession. And sometimes it lasts, sometimes it doesn't. You know, everybody laughs at me because, especially clients, because they see me every 6 weeks and they're like, oh, I've been doing the cold water swimming. And I'm like, oh, yeah, I'm not doing that anymore. I'm not doing that anymore. I also very strangely would pay fees for everything. Like somebody would go, I can get you fit. And it's $1,000. And I'd be like, now I'd pay the $1,000 for 15 minutes. I'd be all over it. And then after 15 minutes, I'd be like, okay, ghost them.
I'm asking these questions because I'm at the beginning of a new obsession, I guess. And the new obsession, it sounds really ridiculous because, you know, I was diagnosed in 2022. So similar to you, we're in like, you know, a couple of years, that sort of time frame. And only now am I suddenly becoming obsessed about looking after my brain. And therefore, I have become, you know, I started, do you know Heights, the supplements?
Yes, I do.
I've been taking those for 2 weeks now. It's a game changer. I've got my wife on them. I've got everybody I know on them.
Like, Charlotte, get on
And I do feel different. I do feel I'm not on medication. I do feel more focused.
What I seek all of the time is clarity. So anything that I do now, and I think from my diagnosis, my big focus is clarity. If I have more clarity, I am a more calmer, controlled person in every sense. So I started religiously on Dirty and I felt the difference. I am fully addicted to caffeine. I find that if my ADHD is going quite mad, having a double espresso is amazing. I'm a double espresso nap guy.
Have you ever had a double espresso? Yeah, I love a double espresso in the evening.
Me too. So do you know what? Somebody told me once, and this is something I've stuck with. I travel a lot with work. And somebody said, if your jet lag's kicking in, neck a double espresso, sleep for half an hour and you're going to feel fine. And it's amazing.
Okay.
So I would also get into Waterloo, go into Pret, stick a spoonful of the mushroom coffee in my double espresso. And that was perfect because I was like, okay, I have to have the double espresso in Pret. I also love to support local. I love all of those things. But in my mind, that's the first part of how my routine in my head works. I started to feel a difference. I was talking to a client about it and she said, have you tried Cybacillin? I said it the wrong way around. Psilocybin. And I said, no, I'm too scared. and said, I know a guy who can help you, and he makes the capsules. You can get them tested, blah blah blah, and he'll give you some liquid so that if you feel you need a little boost, you drop it on your hand and lick it. And I'm also like, if it works, it works. I don't give a if it's illegal or not. If somebody really goes at me, I'll be like, this is helping me. Arrest me. But I then thought, okay, I'm going to start to introduce this into my day, and it's been a game changer. So I did. My social media is sporadic and all over the place, very much like my brain. But I did a thing called the Sertraline Diaries, where I was trying to come off of sertraline. I was getting really bad headaches. I was dehydrated the whole time. And then when I would try to drop them, or if I forgot to take them for a day, I was getting this really horrific pain in the back of my neck that would zap up, which through that communication, somebody said, that's brain zaps. You get brain zaps, and that's why so many people can't come off of it.
Wow.
It makes you nauseous. It makes you feel faint, dizzy, so dehydrated. So again, I was like, this is so incredible for learning. And I also put out a message saying, why is it that we are prescribed these drugs that make us feel like this, that are supposedly making us feel better, but there are things out there that you could actually just go and pick. Tea that helps. There is an element of placebo to a lot of things. And I'm like, does it help? Is it in a big enough quantity to actually make a difference? But it does make a difference. So I'm fine with that.
Nature has the answer.
Nature has the answer. Vinegar, kombucha, walking, fresh air, grounding, all of these things make a massive difference. Do the pharma drugs that I take make a difference? It's a whole bigger story. But again, I think it comes back to society's narrative about people with mental health.
I'm a big fan of anything natural and remedial. And I think the power of nature, I obviously love how nature tastes, right?
Absolutely.
But I also love what it can do. And the next thing that I do want us to talk about is I love how nature smells. And Seedlip, I've heard you talk about Arkive and the power of fragrance within, your new brand and baby, and the impact of fragrance on your head, your body, your mind, your senses, etc. Seedlip all came from smells.
Yeah.
And I couldn't wait to talk to you today about perfume, because I'm so obsessed with it. And I thought that my collection of, like a few hundred perfume bottles was pretty impressive. And how many have you got?
About 8,000. But do you know what? This is years and years and years and years of collecting. For me, scent, it's power of evocation. What would you call that? Power of evoking memory.
Yes.
Is so intense. And okay, this may sound totally mad, but my best form of medicine is my memory. Don't know why that's just made me feel really emotional, because it makes me think of my grandmother. I don't think there's any smell I don't actually like. I don't think there's anything that makes me gag or is like, that's disgusting. And I really don't, because what I feel from any fragrance is complexity, and I'll look for something that I like, and I often find it. So when I looked back to being a young child, the garden, tar, where my nan and granddad lived, it was a tiny little hamlet in West Somerset that was on the Bristol Channel. The smell of salt, the smell in the summer where you got that seaweedy smell, then that smell of silage, which actually people you shouldn't really like, but I'd be like, oh my God, there's something amazing about that smell, being on my aunt's farm. Then my nan's face powder, fragrance that she used, the feeling of when I was with her, if I smelt that smell, I had a positive relationship with that smell. She would often, when I left, give me a massive hug and say, if you miss me, because I get quite upset about leaving there, just smell your top and you'll remember me. And when Riley came to us, we did that with him. And that's where a lot of haircare was born. Burning fragrance in your home being able to compliment somebody. I call them glimmers, and I'm like, if we can create a glimmer for somebody every day, and it could be something as simple as giving them a little smile, or fragrance is the easiest one. Go, oh my God, you smell amazing. It will often be something that they're wearing, their glasses, their haircut, they're simple things that you can do. I've got a Moomin tattoo on the back of my leg. The amount of people that go, oh, I love your Moomin. And I'm like, there's a glimmer there because they've smiled because they've seen it. They've complimented me. I've got a smile. I'll say something nice back. Go on my way.
Win-win.
Win-win. So fragrance for me has that.
I've learned that a big part of actually ADHD and autism and just neurodivergence in general, there's a massive sensory aspect to that.
So true. You know, it's even the touch thing. I'll often stand next to somebody without knowing, and I'm gently tapping the base of their back. For me, it's really important. But for them, the amount of people that say after, that was so relaxing.
You're clearly really, really tactile and kind of senses are important. Let's talk about hair and where that fits in that kind of piece for you.
Do you know, there are so many things with hair that excite me. Probably the main thing being the identity piece. It's self-expressive. You can be yourself with your hair. I see the power of how that can make somebody feel. I'm a huge believer in it's not necessarily about how it looks. And with Arkive headcare, you know, the whole thing sometimes was if all you want to do in the morning is get up and just wash your hair, the products will smell nice. And for me, of course, I'm able to create with it and on it. But when I was young, it was a huge form of expression. And my whole thing in life is small things making a bigger difference.
Yeah.
So actually, you know, it's like, you don't actually have to do that much to look after it, really, in the grand scheme of things, if you don't look after it. But it can be a way of you showing your identity. Think of punk and mohawk, Blondie, Madonna, all of these people that actually, Madonna called a tour blonde ambition. It's like, it can be huge or it can be as small as, feel like shit. I'm going to wash my hair, brush my teeth and put some fragrance on.
Yeah, that's simple.
That simple.
Yeah.
And
Can I tell you a secret? I haven't been to a hairdresser for over 20 years.
Why?
Because the idea of that experience terrifies me.
Yeah. I'm not going to go into why, but some people say it's like going to a dentist, and I'm like,
it's a trust thing.
It's
an
trust.
Escape thing. It's
also you're sat in front of a mirror, really exposed.
Yeah. Yeah. And someone's behind
you, controlling you.
Yeah.
But actually for somebody who struggles, I'm a patron for haircuts for homeless. So we often, and we encourage homeless communities to come in and hairdressers to support them. Sometimes you know that it's just about the touch.
Yeah.
And that's the big difference. But hair for me is the most amazing form of self-expression. And do you know what's been amazing is, especially over the last couple of years, to see culturally how important it is and how the conversation is opening up and people are learning way more about the importance of hair in society. It's really exciting.
Yeah, that keeping that passion alive is amazing. And that's then amazingly inspiring for all of the young hairdressers out there that look up to people like you.
Yeah.
It sounds like whether it's hair, clothes, you know, flowers, nature, perfume, human connection, like tactility is very important to you.
So important. But very strangely, somebody comes to give me a hug, I struggle. And
How did it feel when I came to give you a hug?
Well, I was really excited to meet you.
I didn't give you a choice.
I was no, and I'm getting better.
Okay.
I'm really working on it. And do you know what? I don't regulate my emotions very well. And actually sometimes I would just really struggle. I struggle with so much now. But
it's funny because I if somebody comes to hug me and I'm not feeling it, that'll be really uncomfortable for me. But if I guess I've become so hyper aware and tuned in to body language that I can tell if somebody wants to give me a hug.
I think I can now. And I think I'm beginning to understand that. I think that I struggle anyway with intimacy and being too close. And because of the fact that actually what I felt natural as a young boy was so torn apart, that actually intimacy for me is a struggle. Even like confidence. It's so interesting. People think you're confident, and I was listening to yours and your wife's podcast the other day, and literally I messaged Kenny and went, babe, just listen to this, please. We don't have to talk about it. We don't have to discuss it, but I want you to understand that I understand what I do to you. Like the whole thing of, and this just happened last week, one of Kenny's friends asked us to go for lunch on Bank Holiday Monday. As soon as I heard about it, I start catastrophizing it in my mind. I'm like, babe, I can't go. I cannot go. And do you know what half of it is? If I'm stuck in a conversation, if somebody goes to hug me and I don't want to hug them and I don't know them, if somebody asks me about myself, but I can get up in front of 2,000 hairdressers confidently and talk. I still struggle going out and socializing. I struggle because I don't drink anymore, and it was my medicine, but self-medication, obviously. But ever since I gave up drinking, like going out has been pretty much a no-no, and it will put fear into me for days before.
One of the things that we haven't talked about that I do, like, we've both set up businesses.
Yeah.
And we're both neurodivergent. We've both run businesses. We've both grown businesses, big businesses. You now have a brand that's in how many countries?
Don't ask me that. But
lots of countries,
yeah,
which is amazing. And you've got a team, you've got a salon, you've got clients, you've got all this stuff that's going on. Tell me about like ADHD and being a founder and entrepreneurship.
I think it's tough. I think that's the toughest thing. I've made masses of mistakes, and of course, I'm not shy to talk about them. I don't think this is the right place to talk about some of the mistakes that I've made, because we're not when they. Do you know what they come from? Is having so.
Where have you just gone?
I've gone to. This one's really hard, really, because I definitely have made mistakes. I don't think they're all my fault. And I think a lot of it came from the fact that I didn't understand how my brain worked. And I'm not regretful of any of the mistakes, but I sometimes wish money wasn't involved because I don't understand it. And it really upsets me that things happened. As much people that are driven by money and my inability to really, really fully understand the power of money, it's throughout my life been a real struggle. I just don't get it. And I struggle to take compliments. And I ghost myself as much as anybody else. So in times where I should really stand up and talk, I'm really scared of upsetting people. And sometimes by being my true self, where I can't convey my emotion, I'll often get told my voice can be quite commanding. And really interestingly, I don't think people get upset about what I say. It's the way that I say it. And I'm like, but do you know what's a real difficult thing here is? I'm a huge believer in intention and how you intend and what your intention is when you say something. If I know that I've upset somebody by what I've said, I will categorically walk up to them and say, I am so sorry. I really struggle with how I say things.
Are you blunt?
I don't quite know. That's the interesting thing.
Okay.
I'm told I'm quite blunt. Somebody once said, you don't quite understand actually what people think about you and what they say about you when you're not there. And I'm like, but tell me then. Tell me. It's because I will change.
Yeah. Someone said to me that what people think of me is none of my business unless they choose to tell me.
Absolutely. And do you know what? Just as what people think of me, it's none of my business. I cannot not make it my business. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So again, there are those boundaries in there where I'm like, I should have said something ages ago about this, and I've let it go because I don't want to upset people, and
Why don't you want to upset people?
because I've been told I upset people.
Okay.
And it really hurts because my thing is massively nurturing. I try to nurture people, but my intention is always good.
It comes through really strongly how you want to put good into the world, Adam, and you want to put good into the hearts, minds, and souls of other people. But I can't kind of sit here and hear you and go, yeah, and Adam's doing that to himself.
Do you know what? I'm going to go back to one thing. One of my clients recently said to me, you don't choose anything easy. Nothing that you choose is easy. She said, when you adopted, you decided to adopt a child who was a difficult to adopt age. Myself and my husband, Kenny, who is my savior. There's no doubt about it. We said, well, look, we can give a child who may struggle to be adopted and who may have other things going on. We can do that. We rescue dogs. We rescue senior dogs. I set up businesses in the pandemic. I walk away from a successful business because it's not good for my head. I don't choose things that are easy. And I think that's, again, to do with the way that my brain is wired. But do you know what I do is I get back so much. So on this head hike, 30 people came. We went for a walk on Box Hill, and there were people who, one lovely girl was like, I've come from London today on my own. I've walked up the hill. The conversations that we had, I had conversations with 4 people, and I felt so energized after that. So me opening up as a part of my brand, this head hike idea, even what I do on social media, really, it's all about questioning, and it's the answers that I get back that are my fuel. I say they recharge my batteries.
You see, you're totally the opposite to me, where you get your energy from. And I'm like forced rhubarb, right? You put me in the dark on my own and I'll create magic. Don't anyone come near me. Leave me alone. I don't want to connect with anybody else. And that's how I'll recharge.
Yeah, and I get that. I do think I do that sometimes, you know. So I'd probably say I've got a bit of both of those things. Because actually on Saturday, the thought of going to do that thing wore me out, and I hadn't even got there.
Like dinner tonight.
Yes. Yeah. And do you know what? Even sometimes with clients, I'm like, I've got to go and do a full day of clients and I'm knackered. Sleep for me is probably my best form of medicine.
Sleep is everything.
It's everything. And I've just come out. So I suffered for about 12 years with insomnia, and it was bad. And I talked about it with people, and I was on panels, and I tried everything to help me sleep. And I still have bouts of extreme insomnia, and it's horrific. And it makes me sad. Like, it can make me so sad. And it makes me feel so lonely. Like, one of my biggest things about ADHD is my loneliness. I can feel lonely in the most energized situation because I struggle with feeling lonely. With insomnia, lying there at night, like, I feel so lonely.
I've got this picture of you that's just come into my mind of probably like some uber mega fashion show in Paris or New York or something with like hundreds of people, and you and everything's black, and there's just you in the spotlight, and you're surrounded by all, it all looks very glamorous, all amazing, but there's you and you're on your own.
Well, that's imposter syndrome as well, which I think comes from a feeling of isolation and loneliness. Imposter syndrome for me is horrific. It's so horrific. Every single day of my life, I wake up thinking, is today the day that I'm going to be found out for being a total and utter fraud? In every sense.
You are not your thoughts.
I know.
You are not your thoughts, Adam.
Do you ever wish you could just switch it off 5 minutes?
I used to.
Yeah, see, I'm glad you said that.
I used to.
I am so glad you said that.
Now I am so excited about what my brain is going to do later this afternoon.
So funny, me too.
Ellie Middleton came on and she said it so brilliantly. It's like she was working against her brain.
Yeah.
And like treating it as another. and a problem. And now she works with her brain.
Yeah.
And I am the most kind to myself now than I have ever been.
That's where I need to get to. And that is categorically where I need to get to.
Get on the heights.
I am going to, literally, I'm like, if Charlotte hasn't ordered them and they're not there by the time I get out, she's sacked.
What have you brought as your neuro spicy contribution, Adam?
So I've bought 2 things.
Rebel.
So this tin, I was given as a little boy. It had toffees in it, and I love toffee.
Okay.
Dawn French and I share a love of toffee. And this was my treasure tin when I was little. It had all sorts of little things in, maybe a stone from the beach glass, a flower that had dried, feathers. Feathers are a big part of my life for some strange reason.
But a safe tin.
It was a safe
box.
tin, and it's sort of come with me through life. When I went to New York, it sat beside. I lived in New York for 2 years in the early 2000s, and it would sit beside my bed. And actually, do you know what? For me, it's familiarity. And it's so funny that it still means the same to me now as it did back then. But again, for me, it's that memory. And as I said, when I'm richest is when I'm enveloped by memory. And then this is a bottle of fragrance. This was my nan's last ever fragrance.
I know that bottle.
It's amazing. And it hasn't got the lid on. I don't know where the lid is.
Can you describe it for listeners? Tell us.
So this is an A&A by Cacharel. And my nan introduced me to fragrance. And when my nan passed it, she was the most incredible woman, but she had had quite a tough life. She was disabled through an operation that went wrong when she was very young. Her brother died in the Second World War under mysterious circumstance, but she also believes he was gay. But she didn't know. Her sister took her own life. There's a question as to whether she was gay. She married my granddad, who was amazing. Her family was so important to her. And I have this real strange belief that she believed that I was her brother came back because his life was taken too short. So we had this incredible relationship. Wow. We laughed, we argued. It was so special. So one of the fragrances in Arkive is called No One Else, and it's based on that greenhouse that I spoke about. It's rhubarb, tomato leaf, Palo Santo, all of these things that mean something. So I always say a fragrance has a head, a heart, and a grounding note. I've always done that. I've always taken from it. Head is what makes me smile. My heart is what makes me remember those memories, and then the grounding note, keeping your feet on the ground.
I listen to you, and I'm kind of like, Adam gets so much from experiences that are positive, and that's a dinner party, or whether that's sitting here right now, and then he kind of archives them and puts them in the bank so that he can return to them if he needs pepping up.
Yes.
Or if he needs some inspiration.
Yep. If I need to laugh a bit. Do you know what's really interesting? I've just sprayed that by accident. I didn't think I had anything in. The smell has just literally, and I think are you serendipitous? Do you believe in serendipity and what have you? I believe that's my nan telling me it's all okay.
I can smell it now.
I know. But how's that after 21 years? How's that still got that fragrance?
Yeah, that's great.
And I'm not joking.
I can smell it.
And I literally just was like, that's a little message to say everything's going to be okay. And I do believe in shit like that.
I believe in shit like that too. And I also believe your nan can she can close us there, Adam. That is thanks Nan. She's given us the Bella doesn't have to kind of go, guys, you got to stop now.
They're probably all fast asleep in there.
Thanks, Nan. Thanks, Nan. And thank you, Adam.
Thank you. Thank you so much.